Now, if you take a look at a React project, like this React demo I showed you in the first course section, to which you again find a link attached to this lecture, if you take a look at such a project, you'll note that in the index.html file that you find there, you won't find any script tags. There in this index.html file in the head section, I have some meta tags and I have link tags, but I have no script tags there. And in the body, I just have the no script tag that shows a fallback message if the user has disabled JavaScript in their browser, but I got no script tags in there. Absolutely no script tags. And we also never add script tags to that file. Nonetheless, as you can of course tell, if I reload this here, this app works and JavaScript code clearly is executing because the React app is executing. And React, of course, in the end is JavaScript code. A special JavaScript code, but it is JavaScript code. So why is this working? Well, because as mentioned at the end of the last lecture, React projects use a build process, which simply means the code you write is not the code that gets executed, like this at least, in the browser. Instead, the code you write is transformed behind the scenes before it's handed off to the browser. In this demo project on Code Sandbox, but also in the local projects I'll use throughout this course, this is done with help of a tool that's running in the background. And you can actually see that tool in the package.json file. This file simply lists all the dependencies of this project, all the libraries used by that project, and therefore, of course, for example, in there we find the React libraries, the two packages that make up the React library, to be precise. But here in this example, we also find the React scripts library in addition. And this is actually a library that's not going to be executed in the browser or that's used by React once it's running in the browser, but instead this React scripts package here provides a bunch of tools that take your code and transform it behind the scenes before it's then injected into the browser, or to be precise, before it's then injected with help of a script tag into the HTML file here. If you take a look at this running website, for example by opening it in a new window, and you then there inspect this page so that the browser developer tools open up, you will see that now there are some script tags in there, actually multiple script tags. And these script elements were generated and injected into this HTML file automatically behind the scenes by this build process that's running in the background. This preview website, which we see here, is being served by a development server that's also running in the background on Code Sandbox. In a local project, on the other hand, you had to explicitly start that development server. And it's this development server which is watching your source code behind the scenes, and which is then also kind of transforming that source code behind the scenes, and which is then adjusting the HTML file to contain these script elements that do then load that transformed source code, so that the transformed source code is executed on the page. And why do we use such a build process? Why does the code need to be transformed? Well, for two main reasons. The first reason is that raw, unprocessed React code won't execute in the browser. Mostly because React code uses this special JSX feature. Now, you will learn more about writing React code and about JSX later once we start diving into React. JSX code simply is this HTML code written in JavaScript files. Out of the box, this would not work because this is not a standard JavaScript feature. If you would try to use this kind of code in our default JavaScript project here, for example in the app.js file, if you would try to add like a div in there and you would open this website preview and try to reload this page, you would see that you would get an error. An error that in the end points at this div here. because this indeed is not a standard JavaScript feature. It does not work out of the box. So for that reason, to enable this syntax, which is crucial in React apps, as you will learn, because React will be all about including this HTML-like code in your JavaScript files. To enable this feature, the code must be transformed so that you can use it whilst writing the code, but it's transformed to something JavaScript knows before the code gets executed in the browser. That's one reason for using a build process. Another reason is that the code you write would not be optimized for production. It would not be minified, for example. Minification simply means that, for example, names of variables or functions are shortened to reduce the amount of JavaScript code that's served to the user. If you take a look at the code that is served to the user here by, for example, visiting one of these imported code files that is served here in Code Sandbox, you'll see that it looks something like this. Pretty unreadable, not the kind of code we would like to work on as a developer, but valid JavaScript code in the end. Though it is code that's highly optimized to be as short and small as possible to reduce the amount of code that has to be downloaded by the website visitor. So that's another reason why React projects typically require a build process. And the good news are that if you create a React project on Code Sandbox or with help of tools like Create React App or Vite, so if you're using projects as we're using them in this course, those projects all come with such a build process. So you don't have to go through any custom setup or tweak anything on your own. But that's also the reason why you also need to install Node.js on your system in order to work on React projects. Because Node.js is not just used to install packages with the npm command or to create projects with the npx command, as you already learned it, but instead it's also used behind the scenes by these tools that are used by that build process that's running behind the scenes. So Node.js is also needed and used behind the scenes to make sure that your React code gets transformed. So that, of course, was a lot of talking about the build process, but it is important to understand that such a build process is used behind the scenes and why it's being used. Back in our vanilla JavaScript project here, which we'll use for this refresher, we should therefore get rid of this invalid JavaScript code, because this project here indeed does not come with a build process that would convert this JSX code to valid JavaScript code, and therefore here we can't use JSX code, but we also don't need it for this refresher.